I've seen so many controversial videos about the LUMIX S1II lately that I bought one out of curiosity. And it does so many things better than my Sony cameras that I kind of accidentally switched to LUMIX now. So here's what happened. I initially planned a video with the title "Why I Keep My Sony A7S III", and I wanted to show why using the LUMIX S1II is not a huge improvement over the A7S III. After only 2 days of using it, it became clear that I will definitely keep this camera and use it as my main camera from now on. It's refreshingly different, and it reignited my desire to create something just for fun and not only for professional work. In general, it seems that LUMIX puts things in their cameras which Sony holds back for their cinema line. The Sony FX6 and FX9 have waveform, the A7S III does not. This one here has it built in. The Sony Venice has open gate. This one here has it built in. And don't get me wrong, Sony cameras are great. I've used my A7S III for over 5 years now and I still like it. However, I did not feel the need to upgrade to another Sony camera in the last 5 years because I think Sony didn't really improve their cameras over that time. And that honestly bores me a bit. I even bought the FX6 just to have something new, but this was just not my camera. I didn't like the lack of image stabilization. Always when I had to use longer lenses, the footage was very shaky and kind of unusable for my cases. On the other hand, LUMIX has made huge improvements over the last few years. I mean, here you get a 6K sensor with all possible monitoring tools. I was so used to having waveform in my Sony FX6 that I really miss it now on my Sony A7S III. However, the LUMIX has it built in. Of course, you could always put on a large monitor on your Sony cameras to have waveform, but sometimes that's just not possible. I joined a road cycling group in March on Mallorca this year, and I really needed the smallest possible setup and the shortest possible setup time. So when I started the camera, I sometimes immediately needed to record. There was no time for connecting a monitor and starting the monitor and so on. False color on the S1II is a fantastic tool that I use all the time since I have it. It allows me to see how each part of the image is exposed. Now I know Sony cameras have zebras, but I really don't like using them. The zebras only indicate that some parts of the image are in a specific range, like skin tones, but you don't get any information about the rest. For example, how is the shadow side of the face exposed compared to the bright side? How is the background exposed? With false color you see all at once, and I don't know any reason why you shouldn't use this. Then I tested both cameras in low light. I used the base ISOs, 12,800 at Sony and 5,000 at the LUMIX, and I think the LUMIX looks better. Surprisingly, the 5,000 ISO is just as bright as the 12,800. I exposed both cameras for the sky. The sky has exactly the same level in both shots. But what we can see is that the highlights on the face on the Sony look definitely worse. It seems that the Sony has less dynamic range in the heights. We can easily correct that by lowering the gain, that's no problem, but it's something that I noticed. I've made the same test and turned the LUMIX up to 12,800 ISO. Of course it was a bit brighter than the Sony then, but when I reduced the gain, you can see exactly that you have more room in the heights to play with. And I think the highlights look better overall. Another reason why I love this is the 6K resolution, which really offers a lot more possibilities to crop in. If you throw the footage on a 4K timeline, of course you can notice that the LUMIX is sharper than the A7S III. But that's not the main reason why I bought this. I think with YouTube compression and all that, you might not even see that big of a difference. It's just really that you can crop in a lot further, and this stays really sharp. Stabilization. This really surprised me. I thought Sony cameras have good stabilization, but the worst stabilization mode of the LUMIX is better than the best stabilization mode of the A7S III, by far. I mean, look at these walking shots during a hike. It's very smooth, almost looks like filmed on a gimbal, and that's with the lowest stabilization mode available. I made some further tests and screwed the A7S III and the LUMIX S1II together, and I tried to walk as smooth as possible. Lowest stabilization modes on both cameras, and you can see how shaky the Sony is on the left and how stable the LUMIX is. Then I switched to active stabilization, which is the highest mode on the Sony, and to the standard mode on the LUMIX, which is the medium stabilization mode. Then I switched the LUMIX to high, the Sony doesn't go any higher, and you see how digitally shaky the Sony footage is when it tries to stabilize the footage. And there are additional things the LUMIX does much better than the A7S III. One of them is the possibility to simply scrub through the recorded footage. That's not possible on a Sony, and it's very cumbersome to jump to a specific point of time in the video. With the LUMIX it works very intuitively. For monitoring and camera control with a mobile phone, both have good apps. Sony's Creators app is quite good now. Image quality sucked a year ago but is now quite usable. And Lumix has two apps, Lumix Lab and Lumix Flow. In Lumix Lab, you can add LUTs to the vlog footage of the camera, so you have a much better viewing experience. And you can send LUTs to the camera or transfer photos from the camera to the phone, send them to your family and friends. So I think Lumix Lab is the better choice compared to Lumix Flow. I like the level of customization you get on Lumix cameras. I think it's better than what you get on a Sony camera. For example, I set this button at the front so that I get a zoomed in view to be able to focus better. There would be the possibility to get this view automatically when you turn the focus ring, but I didn't want that, so I switched it off. So now you can tell the camera if you want to activate the zoomed in view by clicking the button and deactivate it by clicking again, or if you want the magnification window only to be active when you have the button pressed and it's gone when you release it. That's cool. I think this is really thought out, and there are a lot more examples like this, and it helps to make the camera your own. The LUMIX S1II uses a chroma subsampling of 420, but only when you record 6K. In 4K it uses the better 422 mode, which Sony uses as well. So only in the 6K mode less color data is recorded, which could lead to color bands in the sky, which means color transitions could be shown as blocks of colors instead of a smooth gradient. Then I made some tests, and as you can see, even when I apply a very strong grade in the sky, there is no banding visible whatsoever. If you see one, it's YouTube, I promise. It looks totally fine on my Mac screen. We see immediately that the Lumix gives you richer greens and richer blues, which is not good or bad, it's just a bit different, and with a bit of color grading you can really get the same results out of both. I really think, and I'm kind of sad to say that this camera beats the Sony A7S III in all categories except one. With Sony cameras, you can have the autofocus active and tap on the screen to focus on that object, or on a tiny part of the screen. Lumix can do this as well, but you have to switch the autofocus to a specific mode which allows this tracking. It's not a huge deal because the Lumix focuses perfectly of what's in the focus frame normally. But I wish Lumix would add this functionality of touch to focus in a further update. And yeah, open gate. Some say they don't really need it, but I like it a lot. I make advertisements for companies, and we always had to decide beforehand, do we want a YouTube video or something for Instagram and TikTok in a high format? Well, that's now gone. I can really film for both platforms, which is great. You can set frame markers on the screen for both resolutions so that you really see which part of the screen will be in the wide format and which one will be in the high format. Great stuff. And even if you do not need to make two different formats, it's always nice to have that additional space on top, and you can totally reframe your image. Another thing, 32-bit float audio with the XLR audio handle. No chance that I get this on an A7S III, except with an external recorder. And now the elephant in the room, overheating. I shot at 32 degrees Celsius outside. I've shot in Greece. I didn't have any problem whatsoever. So for me, overheating might never be an issue with this camera because I simply don't have the case that I need to record for an hour straight in bright sunlight at 30 degrees Celsius. I will definitely post a lot of videos about the LUMIX S1II on this channel, so stay tuned. I hope to see you on the next one.